Well, welcome to our, our second episode of Winter Springs in the Loop, a conversation here at the beautiful Your Brand Voice. Off camera is Brian here, who's put on this show. So that was my obligatory shout out to the mastermind behind all of this cool tech. We're doing some AI-based cameras back and forth and trying out some different tools. And I'm here with Commissioner Baker. How's it going?
Doing good. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us and having a cool conversation that we hope to have about some local issues. That's kind of the idea behind what we do is in this kind of social media driven soundbite, 30-second sound clip era that we live in, which is not very good for actually solving problems.
It is not.
It's good for making points and getting clickbait. So we're kind of taking the opposite approach to where a lot of people are interested in a more substantive conversation, particularly about local issues. I mean, last time we talked about everything from the 7-Eleven, the old Dominic's location, and just different stuff going on with the city.
Sounds great.
So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
How is it being a commissioner?
You know, it's different than what I expected, but I actually really like it. I like the involvement I get to have with the community. I like getting to hear so many different opinions from everyone and kind of forming my own.
Right.
I like, when you're not hands-on with something, you form a lot of opinions on your own that are just based on the limited knowledge that you have. And then you get behind the scenes and you start understanding the way things work. And I mean, everybody knows government kind of has a lot of red tape, but there is so much more going on behind the scenes constantly and so many moving parts to every project that we're doing. Right. So it's a lot more, I have a lot more clarity.
There's a lot of projects in our city. I mean, it seems like we're kind of moving on a number of different fronts.
Yeah, absolutely.
With our infrastructure, with a new city manager that's
it's kind
getting his feet wet. And how's he doing?
He's doing really good. You know, he's been tasked with a difficult job. He really has. Oh, yeah. We had a lot of failures and an experienced interim city manager for a while and a lot to catch up on. So he's forming his own staff and kind of rearranging things
recently,
a little bit.
If I remember, kind of changed some of the structure of some of the department heads?
Some departments, there's new departments kind of being created. There's structures of the departments changing a little bit and just rearranging people within those departments and opening up spots for new people to come join.
And they're posting the jobs on LinkedIn now. That was a shout out to Victoria Bruce here.
They're posting a lot more on LinkedIn.
I've seen them. I've seen them. There was one, I think it was like something in the marketing or a job that I saw.
Our marketing department just lost one of our people to a private nonprofit sector. So we're excited for him, but it was a big loss for us. But we are, so we now have a marketing social media.
So you think those restructuring of the departments were necessary? Is that something that came from the city manager, or is that something that was directed by the city commission?
I think we put our trust in him. And, I mean, I think everybody had an opinion on certain people or inefficiencies that were happening, but I think we put our trust in, let's see what you have to bring to the table, learn everyone before and he did. You know, he's been here since December. So we're almost 7 months in, and he's learned the staff and kind of taken a look at where things could improve, and he's making those changes. So I like the method.
Because he came from here. I didn't plan on talking about Mr. Sweet the whole time, but he came from, I think, a different, is Northeast. So I have to imagine there's even some culture things.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
As well. You know, I remember I used to live in Virginia, and so that was much more of a southern state. But still, I remember getting here and thinking, when you come from like the DC area, and you think of one idea of what a city is. Like, that's a city. You know, I remember getting to even like downtown Orlando and thinking, not much here. Just like a size and scale and scope kind of thing. So then when you get into like what is Castleberry, Winter Springs? Those are just a kind of a different philosophy, different needs, different infrastructure, challenges. Small town.
I grew up in Cincinnati, which is a huge city. Yeah. But the suburb that I grew up in was about the same size as Winter Springs. Okay. But it never became a city. So it was an incorporated 40,000 people town, had its own fire department and police station, but not incorporated. Okay. So it was very different. And our city manager moved here from an even smaller town, but just outside of Boston. Okay. So he has a lot of the Boston city experience, but from a city smaller.
So you recently, I want to say, not retired. It wasn't a retirement, but it was more like transition out of gainful employment. Yes. You're like full-time city commissioner.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily my intent to be full-time, but I feel like there is so much to learn in Winter Springs, and there are so many things that I get phone calls or text messages or emails around the clock every day. And I'm passionate about this, and these are my neighbors. There's a reason I ran, obviously, if you know my sewage issue, but...
That's when we first met.
Yeah, it is,
was when you're like, hey, why is crap being dumped in my yard? Yeah, and I saw you on the new, I forget the station, but they report...
Spectrum 13.
Okay. Hey, why is this happening?
Yeah, exactly. And, and I was like every other resident that was, I love the city. I moved here because it's beautiful and everybody's kind, and we have nice parks and trees, and all of a sudden I had a problem, and I really hadn't looked into what the city had to offer before that, or what the problems were. So I want to hold good on my word that I'm going to work for the people, and I felt like there was too much training, too much learning, too much hands-on work that needed to be done for me to continue my full-time job that was back in Cincinnati. So,
I tell people that I had no interest in city politics, but city politics took an interest in me.
Yeah.
It's like, what else can you do when an issue just hits you right in the face? You're literally walking out your door and something's happening in your yard. Yeah. And you're like, okay, this does actually matter to have competent, qualified leadership that knows how to address problems. And you mentioned the training. You were just down somewhere in the South Florida area. And that was like a municipal training.
Yeah, it was from the Florida League of Cities. Okay. We have a membership with them, and they're nationwide, and then they have smaller chapters per state, and then they have even smaller chapters for counties. So we are also a member of a tri-county Florida League of Cities as well. But they offer a ton of training, both webinars and in-person training and conferences and whatnot. And so I've done a lot with them since being elected, and this one was called the Institute of Elected Municipal Officials. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I follow.
EMO is what they call it. So EMO. But it was a 2-day intense training, and they had it was like 4 hours per section of training that we did. So. And we had to be present for all of it to get our certificate. So,
that's it's not so much like a requirement, but it's more like a continuing education idea.
Yes, exactly. So it's not something we have to do as elected officials.
Does that focus on small? Because I feel like the difference between Winter Springs, which feels big, but it's still really not when you compare it to other major metropolises. Mm-hmm. Do they focus on a certain kind of city or is it just broadly for everybody?
It's pretty broad for everyone, but they definitely, I think that's the benefit of having it an in-person training, is that there are people from every size city there. And, there's constant turnover in city management and commissions or city councils. So at my table alone, there was one person there from a town that only had 143 people. And then there was another person at my same table.
143 people at some of our meetings.
Right, exactly. And then there was another one there that was, 87 or 89,000. So I was kind of the middle of the road. Yeah. And I mean, there was somebody else at our table with 400. It was, but then they, the way they kind of do it, because there were 2 people from our city there, they don't allow us to sit at the same table because of sunshine.
Right.
And if there is a question that's specific to our city, they make us use an anonymous card.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so any other questions that are hand-raised questions, unless they have to kind of be very broad questions. And so we learned a lot based on who was asking the questions as well.
Okay.
Most everybody there had the same form of government as we had. I think there
Like
were
a city manager led.
city manager,
city council
commission.
run. Okay.
Yeah. There was maybe one or two that had city manager and mayor,
There's
straw
not that
mayor.
many
So
of those.
yeah, there's not a
I
lot.
know Duval/Jacksonville is one.
Yeah.
But they have like 17 or something council members. It's
Yeah.
kind
Well,
of wild.
Ironically, it was the really small town that I was sitting with. It was 145 people that had it. So.
I guess if you got 145 people, finding 10 of them to be commissioners doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
You're almost in the minority if you're not on the city council at that point. Yeah. So one of you mentioned sunshine. I'm kind of getting an indoctrination into that because of the Metro plan. I don't know if you saw. I was put on the Metro plan.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so
we're excited.
I'm learning what I can and can't say now.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brings in a lot of regional and the relationships between not only the city and the county, but other cities around.
Yeah.
Because when you look at things at a holistic level, you quickly find out the things that we're dealing with have a connection and a direct impact with the cities around. And we kind of learned that a little bit of the hard way over the last few years. We've had issues with the interlocal agreements that Winter Springs was kind of in and out of.
Yep.
We had issues with like storm runoff in between different places, and you realize you don't live in a vacuum.
Right.
You live in a community where it's like, my neighbors. We've got neighbors.
Yeah, we share problems with other cities.
Exactly, and the county too. And so I was curious. So we're back in the, I guess, just a broader discussion and concern that we've had over the years has been, and this is purely past. Not current leadership, but there have been a lot of concerns about our bad relationships with the county.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I'm very, very happy has seen some great progress.
Definitely improving.
So tell us about that and like your thoughts about the relationships with the county and some of these agreements. I mean, one of the first things you guys did was jump back into the ILA.
Yep.
So maybe what is an interlocal agreement and what was the importance behind doing that?
Yeah, so interlocal agreements are, depending on which one it is, it's basically where we work together with the county or the cities on problems that affect us all. So we were the only city in Seminole County that wasn't a part of the school district one as well. So it's...
So we were part of the school district, but what was the agreement?
That's a great question. I'm still learning a little bit about it. So I don't have full knowledge on that. There's a lot of committees I'm trying to join so I get more information attending all these school board meetings.
The point is, it was part of this kind of idea of like, you have 7 municipalities in Seminole County, and it always seems like Winter Springs is like the odd one out. Right, the odd one out.
Yeah.
So that has been, from my perspective, smoothed over.
Yeah.
And, we're kind of doing our part to support the broader effort with our school system. I know part of the agreement had to do with like class sizes and different things where, these are things that are dictated and run by the school board, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
Our public schools have always been very, very strong.
Yes.
It's good to see, as I've talked to some of the folks up in Sanford with the county, there does seem to be some tides changing in terms of
even when I was running
those
for office, I had people from the county or from the school board reaching out to me in hopes of forming a relationship before I was even elected. So it definitely, they were showing us, because I kind of had heard, along the campaign trail that we don't work well with these these other bodies,
Right.
and that they don't like working with us as a result. But that wasn't what I found at all when I was
Right.
running. Was they wanted to work with us, and they were kind of eager. So I don't know where the disconnect was
Well,
with
it's
previous
because our
commissions,
past
but-
leadership has said things like, Castleberry's purposely flooding us.
right, and that's not
There's
true.
things that are like,
yeah.
okay, when you say stuff like that, that's
Yeah.
probably why the relationship deteriorates a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that, for me as a resident of the city, I take great solace in the fact that those relationships are improving.
Mhm.
I hear that the kind of word on the street, since the change last November. It's been very encouraging. So you had you made a headline with your conversation with our wonderful Chief Trax
Yes.
on the ICE issue. So I'll just start the comment with the statement that right after that, I told you I was very happy
Mhm.
as someone personally who my questions have not always been well received by we'll put it that way. Not of the chief, but just questions I've asked in general as somebody who has repeatedly raised concerns
Mhm.
over different things. I was very happy that your questions were well received.
Yes, I was too.
And you got the chance to ask the questions. For context, for the viewers, it was questions related to the mandates involving ICE,
Yes.
and your questions for the chief about how that was going to be implemented,
Yeah.
what the perspective was.
Yeah.
Have you had continued dialogue with the chief,
Absolutely.
and kind of where
Yeah.
do you feel like your concerns have been addressed? Tell.
I do.
Where are you at with that?
The chief, first of all, he's amazing. So he was very eager to answer all of my questions, and we had talked about it a little bit before that meeting, and I had already expressed my concerns, but I felt that those were concerns that the public might have too, and that I needed to have that conversation with him in public. He expressed some of the same concerns of how far we'll be asked to go, and not wanting to put his officers in a position they were uncomfortable in. And we're a small town. Everybody knows each other, and we're neighbors.
Right.
Most of our officers live here in the city, and they don't. They're not looking to arrest their neighbors, without cause. The continued conversation that we've had is, where are we now? So it was just, that's been a couple months ago now that happened. And ICE, the federal body, has just now accepted our agreement.
Okay.
So we had signed it a while ago, like right after that meeting, but they hadn't done anything with it. So we've not even selected officers yet to even complete the training. They just accepted the agreement. That will be the next step, would be to select one or two officers. They'll probably volunteer who was willing to do it.
And those are like point people for if anything arises in that nature, that these are the people that we go to?
Yeah,
Okay.
So basically if a warrant comes up for someone that is suspected to not have the proper documents, then while under an investigation for a criminal activity,
Right.
they will then call in the person that's trained with the ICE protocol, and their sole job will be to hold them and transport them to the county jail, which I believe Orange County might even have taken over for Seminole County.
Okay.
Seminole County really just doesn't even have a problem. So even though it was a mandate, it's technically only a mandate for departments that actually have holding jails.
Okay.
So we wouldn't have had.
Does Seminole County have?
We
say
do.
they don't? Okay.
Yeah. So Seminole County has a holding jail, and we assumed we would be taking them there, but it seems like it's just not really happening. So Orange County is kind of agreed to take it on.
Look at some of the national headlines. And
absolutely.
Since your conversation with Chief Trax, there's been seems like it's been every day in the news.
Oh yeah, there's protests everywhere now.
Protests everywhere. It's much more of a, like you said, you may have used the word hotbed, where there's certain locations which are, I can't think of any anywhere in Florida where that is an issue.
Florida
or that's
has a real
erupting.
melting pot of people, so we're
Right.
who knows where we're from here.
Right,
so.
right, exactly. So do you think that when you said it's not an issue here in Florida, do you mean that we don't have people who are here illegally committing crimes? Or is
no,
that more
I wouldn't say that.
Is it not a political issue, or it's not a...
It's not here in Seminole County, and especially in Winter Springs. We just don't have a large population of immigrants that are undocumented and much less committing crimes. So it's just kind of a non-issue for our area. It's not to say that there's parts of other areas that it isn't an issue. So I think what people are concerned about the most is the raids and the improper training or the profiling that might be happening or mistaken, the wrong person taken in or, a document mix-up on the computer system. And so, that's what a lot of these protests are about is just people being taken from their homes without actually being the right person to take. So I think everybody's just on edge right now. And I wanted to make sure that if we signed this contract that our residents wouldn't also feel on edge. So I think the line of questioning that I had was answered very appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he was willing to answer every question, that was asked.
Yeah.
And, to me, I think the issue breaks down when you take things that are both human issues and issues of both freedom, individual liberty, or public safety.
Yes.
There's just these issues which come to play, and the problem is when you make them purely political issues, which I think is what happens in some of the national dialogue.
Absolutely.
And then when you start interacting with those, I think, very real issues and legitimate concerns that people have, and you start you put that in the chopper of the outrage industry that exists to score points on all of these things.
And clickbait.
It's like so much of it is we have perception over here and we have reality over here, and I think there are legitimate concerns that people have, simply because all it takes is one time for you to realize that this person probably shouldn't have been here.
Right.
And it's when you're the victim of it, not that I'm not pointing to myself, but it takes on a human element.
It does. Yeah. I had a very healthy debate yesterday with my oldest son on this topic, actually. And it was really interesting because, Gen Z, they have a very different opinion politically than a lot of my generation.
Right.
So it was a really, really interesting conversation. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is something that you actually just said, is that there's so many facets of why we form our opinions the way we do.
Right.
So, I might be looking at, from a human rights and civil liberties way, but he's looking at it from a public safety measure. And it's like, how do we take those two concerns and bring them together to do the right thing and make this country exactly what it's supposed to be,
To enforce the laws that are there and respect everybody's rights under those laws.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it's been the challenge with law enforcement since law enforcement was
created. Exactly. It is.
As a public safety mechanism.
Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for our department here in Winter Springs, and I know they have a lot of respect for their
they're doing their jobs.
Exactly.
And it's a job that you have to be a certain type of person to put yourself in that line of fire.
Yeah.
So I have nothing but respect for the chief, for answering the questions, for you, for asking the questions, and for the entire format of that interaction. It was cool to see it in the public eye. And I thought, okay, this is kind of how it should work.
Yeah.
Where, we're going to have our disagreements, where we'll probably see things from different perspectives. But what's healthy about it now versus in the past is that there is that healthy dialogue.
There is. And I think one of my biggest goals when I have those kind of conversations publicly is I don't expect to change everybody's mind. Heck, that the answers could have changed my mind.
Right.
And that's exactly what I do expect, is that it just to open a conversation and allow people to see different sides of things that maybe they didn't consider before.
And you can understand, and not you, but just broadly, we can understand why people who have honest questions, when you're told you shouldn't ask them, it doesn't help.
No, it doesn't.
And you start to wonder, okay, well, what am I actually after here?
Yeah.
And so we first started asking questions about stuff, and it's like, there may have been nothing there.
Right.
But if you don't answer the question, everybody assumes like there's something there. And in our case, I'm referring to water issues and different things. There was actually stuff there.
Right.
And so something I wrote this down, and sorry to look at a note here, because I want to get the quote exactly right, and I'm not going to ask you to. I'm going to talk for a minute here about. So the only thing that was said through that whole discussion was something the mayor said about it, and he said, "We have $100 million in state revolving funds that we will be relying on. We have a lot of other things that we will be relying on. We must work together with the state." And I remember in that dialogue, his essential argument for going along with it was, we don't want to have a bad relationship with the state because we're depending on them for funding to fix our water system. And it was one of the most unusual connections that I've ever seen anybody make, where he's essentially expressing concerns that related to ICE as being a reason why the state may not trust us to help fund our water improvements. And I think if there is any concern about the state not wanting to give us money related to our water system, it probably has a lot more to do with the history of mismanagement of the system than it does ICE. It was just one of those moments where I thought it was just a very bizarre connection to make.
One would think.
Because he's actually made misstatements too, Jay, like in the past.
Yeah.
And I just, it all goes to the issue of credibility.
Right.
And the fact that I really feel like now, because of the new dais that we have in place, because of the relationships that you're building and the renewed trust that I hear from folks both in Tallahassee and here in Seminole County, that we have turned a page in terms of the degree of trust that there is. And I think that's going to open the door for a lot of the things that we need the state to do to come in and help us out. And so I'm making a comment to kind of pivot to ask you, where do you see... So there's concerns about the just cost of everything. There's applications. I've talked to different commissioners, talked to the city manager. It's applications that are going to be made to help fund a lot of the improvements that we need to. But there's also cost increases that have been there. Yeah. Just talk to the residents about the overall where things are at with the wastewater improvements specifically. Do we feel like we're going to be able to get those plans funded entirely? Is that a pipe dream? What's your perspective?
Yeah, we do feel like we're going to be able to get them funded completely by loans and grants. In some cases, there'll be some grants added in there. Basically, the rate increases that happened 2 years ago and will continue for the next 3 years were to cover maintenance, but also to cover the added cost of paying back those loans once we do have them in place. Right. So, it's not necessarily a terrible thing for cities to take on debt, especially when we have a good credit rating, which we do. But it's scary because this is a lot of money. We're talking about several $100,000. So, but it's an investment in our future. So it does look like they're funded. It does look like everything's on track. We had a few delays with, conversations and looking at other options. As a new commission, I think that was kind of us doing our due diligence to say, okay, let's pause for just a second and make sure that what we had a healthy distrust of
Right.
of what happened with the previous administration.
Right.
So, especially myself having sewage in my yard now 4 different times. So,
What's your take on the series? Like, how bad was it? I mean, I got the feeling that we were like, and still may be because we still have the old plant.
yeah.
One catastrophic event away from a zero property value. Like that's like the doomsday scenario.
That is a doomsday
I understand.
scenario.
And, I had somebody who toured one of the plants tell me that they felt like if they clenched their fist, they could punch a hole through the wall of the plant. Like
They're falling apart.
Those are the stories that we're hearing, which are telling me like, okay, when are we going to start to see some of the ground breaking on those? I think I went to the last workshop. And as I said at that workshop, I said, I'm really glad that we have some much more realistic time frames that are being put forward. Keep in mind, the initial time frame was that we should have broken ground in like October of 2020 or so. I think that was like the initial, it's like, well, okay, we're 5 years past that groundbreaking. And what is your take on how seriousness the current level of risk is?
Yeah.
Because again, there's a risk that you have in saying something where it's like you don't want to cause alarm to people,
right?
But you also the counterbalance is, we have to be honest in our assessment, and certainly it doesn't make me feel better to have been told, look, you're just overreacting, you're overly concerned, there's no problem. So I would much rather have an honest assessment.
Right.
We're all adults, and I think we can handle the fact that there is some honest risk assessment that's happening here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just as you interact with city staff and others, what is your take on the current level of risk, how it's being handled, and what can you tell the residents in that respect?
I would say the risk is pretty high that we could have a major failure. I will say that the failures that we're at risk for are different failures than what they would looked like a year ago.
Okay.
A year ago, a lot of our lift stations had problems. So a hurricane could have caused a big failure.
Right.
So what we've been doing with all of the lift stations is adding battery backups to them and additional pumps to them. So they have generators and they have additional permanent pumps instead of bringing in mobile pumps right before a storm and hoping for the best,
So because everybody needs them.
Yes,
right
exactly.
Storm,
so and that's been one of the failures that my property was seen multiple times, where these backup things that were mobile, that were in place, that were not working when the actual lift station would fail. So now they've been replacing them steadily throughout the last year, which has been great. And they're also, when they replace those...
these are things that cause the backflow into some of these...
Back when a storm hits and it comes up out of their toilet and shower drains, that's what can cause that. Or it coming out of manholes into people's yards, like what happened to my house. So those things are less likely to happen now that we've been putting those measures in place. So I feel really good about that. It's the main plants themselves that are just degrading so poorly. And then what they're finding when they're going in and doing replacements at a lot of these lift stations is that the old piping is so old, it's becoming brittle and getting micro holes in it. And so not only does that pose a risk to our groundwater.
Is this in the wastewater or potable water?
In both. So a lot of our piping is just getting old and brittle. So what we're also doing is we're relining all of the pipes with a much newer material. And it saves a lot of money to not have to completely re-pipe everything. And the lifespan of it is over 50 years.
What material is that?
It's like I don't know what it's called. I could figure that. I could find out. But it's like a polymer of some sort.
Okay.
It's like a 50-year lifespan.
Do you just like pump it through and it sticks to it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just pump it through and it kind of blows up and sticks to the
Okay.
exterior of it. And you can use similar things if your pool, the pipes in your pool break.
Probably need to do that because my
right?
pool's leaking.
I have a leak in mine too.
I'm probably creating an environmental catastrophe in my backyard right now. So
right.
Here we are live online, admitting to some things.
Right.
No, but it won't be worse than anything that's happened over the last 5 years, because that creates like a seeping issue.
Right.
Both.
Yeah.
Is it the water going out or
it's the bigger problem is stuff coming in.
Okay.
So there's dirt coming into them and blocking them basically, and causing us to have these failures because they get blocked up with dirt coming into them and then backing up. So
and creating all the natural organics that are now in your water.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it is mostly the wastewater that is affecting, but so it's more of a hassle than than anything. But it's just a fact of our plants and infrastructure being old and way past their lifespan.
Does the plans to replace the plants also include plans to fix some of the piping and other infrastructure with these loans that we're going after?
Yeah, they've done a full assessment of basically everything, and
I've seen the plan that was a little while back from a previous utility director who put it out. I'd imagine the current city manager is reviewing that and revising it, and that's
working with directly with the engineers and with now who we hired to take over our water treatment plants, all of them. And they have their own set of engineers, they have their own set of construction people, so everybody's got eyes on it now to make sure that what they build is going to last, but also grow with us and take care of the problems that we have.
So the residents since 2019 raised concerns relentlessly, got thousands of petitions, and eventually were able to see what I believe to be very good news, that we've got a new group that's going to come in and manage the water system. And that was honestly a really, really huge deal.
I think so too.
Both in terms of fixing the mechanical systemic problems that existed, as well as communicating that, look, we're going to change things.
Yes.
And we're not going to continue with the status quo.
Yeah.
Again, that public statement was not as big a deal as the actual improvements that will be seen from a competent group doing the work.
Exactly.
But there is something to be said about the public trust.
Yes.
For the sake of everybody's peace of mind, that our concerns are being heard and and our concerns were validated. And so there were some meetings. Has a new group been selected?
They have.
Okay.
We're still working on the negotiation of the actual final pricing of them doing the work, but we have selected them. It's Woodard Curran is the brand that we picked.
They're a local group.
They're semi-local.
Okay, semi-local.
So they have the southeast portion of the country.
Okay.
So and they're big enough to have the manpower to bring in other crews if we have a big storm, for instance.
Okay.
So they can send people from the Carolinas or Georgia to come and work for us before the storm hits them next, and then they all go to the
come help us here.
And then just follow it up. Yeah. So they have a large enough crew to handle major disasters. But they also are local enough to understand the problems of the aquifers that are in Florida, or the wastewater problems that we're having, or our type of soils, or just all of the things that a large company like Veolia doesn't really have enough men on the ground to I think there was a big disconnect between a large company that works for the city and just doing their job.
Well, and there's something to be said about we can get on the phone with the president of the company if we need to. And when Veolia was based internationally, and they made so many billions of dollars that their leadership probably never heard of the city of Winter Springs.
Exactly. And the Woodard and Curran's leadership was at the workshop meeting while they were being graded and presented. And the person that's going to be in charge of our plants grew up in Tuscaloosa. So, his first job out of college was working at the East plant as an intern.
Okay.
So, like, he has investment in this community himself. Right. So that is one, and when they came in, it wasn't just that I liked about them, but they came in and they addressed our problems directly. They had pictures of our plants in their presentation. And they came in and said, this is how we fixed problems at other cities, but they also talked about problems that they caused at other cities and how they fixed them.
Wow.
They took ownership.
Wow,
and
that's a big deal.
I thought that was the most impressive part of their entire presentation.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah.
To do that. That does more to build trust. And you said something about the individual who's going to be managing the plants growing up in Tuscaloosa. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is the best way to argue for home rule.
Yeah.
To me, I think the home rule argument gets caught up in this whole us versus them. Like, where's the power?
Yeah.
It's not really about where's the power. It's about ownership.
Yeah.
And the
local voices.
Exactly. Yeah. And the reality that if you have somebody who lives here whose house will also be affected by this storm, they're going to have a level of ownership and responsibility that somebody even who lives in another part of the state won't have.
Exactly. When your friends and family and you are all in this community,
right? Exactly.
You have $1. You're
going to go that extra mile.
Yeah.
I remember when we first moved here, one of the guys that lived across the street worked for the power company. And he was our favorite neighbor.
Oh, I bet.
We saw his truck leave, and our house was probably one of the earliest ones to have their power restored.
Yeah.
We live right next to the power guy. It's like having those local people that know how to fix it and get the job done.
Yeah.
I think the whole argument gets turned on its head when you start arguing about territorial fights over control versus ownership and responsibility.
Yes.
And
it's a really good way of looking at it. That's a much better argument for the importance of home rule than some of the way it gets conflated. Yeah.
Sometimes. So we need home rule, and that's, I think, outsourcing it in the wrong way. So we're still outsourcing it, but we're also bringing some of the stuff back in, which I think is a really good move that the city manager has made.
Yeah, one of the things related to water is like the lift stations and the kind of the immediate workers will be back in on city staff again. Yeah. So it'll be a partnership. And
is that like more expensive, less expensive?
It's less.
Okay. Yeah. So it's less expensive to hire these people back in staff than it was to have had Veolia do it.
Yeah, and it gives us more.
So we're saving money and we're getting better.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, right.
Incredible. Sorry, those were leading questions.
Yeah, right.
With an agenda.
You can look at it like, yes, our payroll is going to go up, but our contract price will go down.
Yeah, we're just shifting it and saving.
Yeah.
Incredible. It's incredible how that works.
It is.
Sorry. There's some cynicism to my sarcasm to my comments as somebody who's been arguing for these things for years.
Yeah.
So if you just kind of wrapping it up, what are you looking forward to over the summer? What are like the big things we're going to be tackling between now and the fall? Obviously, bringing the new group in. Are there any other things that you're kind of tackling?
I think you'll like one of the things I'm most excited about is, and it's super small, but it's just having a more sustainable life and bringing chickens to Winter Springs.
Yes. We own 5 chickens.
Yeah,
5 hens.
Yeah, and much like me,
so that was,
you're in a PUD,
I
so
remember,
we kind of had that loophole for us.
Right, exactly.
And
so are you changing for everybody?
We're going to make it where residential zoning can also have chickens. And so I'm in the
process.
Everybody?
Okay.
Unless they're in an HOA.
Sorry, not picking on anybody.
So HOAs won't be able to have, they'll be able to control whether or not they have them. So HOAs, it's like federal government, state government, county government.
So everybody will be allowed by the city.
By the city, everyone will be allowed, unless you live in an apartment or a duplex, or we have to set some limits.
That's good. There does need to be some limits.
I do love a good house chicken, but
that's a bridge I'm not willing to cross.
Right.
Mine are safely in my backyard.
Right. I feel
on my
like
half-acre lot.
I feel like I always have, one of my chickens that lives in the house, but I don't recommend it.
Full disclosure, I tried to give you a rooster one time because one of our hens ended up being a rooster.
Yes.
You wouldn't take it.
I
it
did.
was a
I would
nuisance.
not. I unfortunately, I recently bought 5 at Tractor Supply.
Okay.
And 2 of them are roosters.
You can't. It's impossible to know.
Yeah. So they're and what was I supposed to do? Like, I can't just leave 2 little babies there. It was the last 5. Even if I could know.
Okay.
So, but. So now I have to rehome these 2 roosters because I would like my neighbors to continue liking me, and I feel like
that was our motive too.
Yeah, and I feel
actually,
like as the policy person here, I should probably follow the policy.
My motive was my personal sanity because this was constant.
Yeah, they have not started crowing yet.
Okay.
And they're little and adorable and lovable. And
there's a safety thing because they started going after my daughter.
They do. They're very protective of their flock, which is wonderful. But it's not when there's one chasing you.
Well, at some point, I look forward to that change being made. There's like a therapeutic side of it too for certain special needs kids. Great interaction.
My son is on the spectrum and homeschooled, and they even say that owning chickens and spending time with your chickens raises your serotonin levels. So, and I find I am very happy when I'm sitting with my chickens.
My daughter's out there all the time.
Yeah,
she loves it. We did it to try to save some money off of eggs,
and that doesn't work, does it?
It doesn't work because you end up feeding them. You have to feed the chickens. That's what they don't tell you.
You have to buy them a coop. You have to build them a fancy run.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You have to get them toys.
It's an expensive hobby, but we do love 5 eggs a day.
Yeah,
and it's
we eat a lot of eggs.
Oh, I'm sure because you have a lot of chickens.
Yeah, I do. I have more than you, and that's
she brags. She says, "Humble brag there."
Yeah,
I have more than you. How many more did?
I think I have 12 right now.
Okay.
But that's something that we're writing into the policy as well. Is that it will be based on how much land you own.
How many chickens you have is based on how much land you own?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So like I have almost 3 acres and can support more chickens. And in my next neighbor.
Is there any regulation about how they need to be contained in any way, or
there will be on this? There will be some regulation on having a chicken run or having them supervised if they are outside of the run.
My daughter loves putting them on a leash.
Yes,
it's the
I know.
Cutest thing ever.
It's so cute. I know. I think it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for the community.
Are you looking at some like Oviedo? I'm sure you can look at what they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although they probably let them roam a little bit more.
They do. They have a much more open policy than I think Winter Springs will end up having. But, we have to start somewhere. So,
I'm sure this is going to be a very, very popular idea.
I think so.
I remember when former Commissioner Krebs spoke up about it and had some dialogue there. So on stuff like that, I kind of leave my personal views out of it because I'm like, maybe I'm not objective.
Because we have them.
We live in a great area, where the yard's a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
So the only restriction will be on the apartments.
Yeah.
And then restrictions about roaming and
and
the numbers that you can have.
Yeah, and there'll be some restrictions on like the size of the coop that can be built or the size of the chicken run.
We have to get permits for coops.
So that's what I'm working on. It'll be same as a building permit. So it'll be over a certain square footage amount that it will require a permit. But most small backyard chicken coops are going to be far below what that permit size is. So.
Just don't want to have an egg farm that's at a massive commercial scale.
Exactly, and somebody's HOA. Yeah, that would be terrible.
Okay, so when will that likely change?
My goal is to have the overview of it presented before the next commission meeting to staff, and then legal will start working on writing the ordinances.
Okay.
So I hope sometime this summer that it will actually go into effect.
that's something in the course of this conversation I never knew, and
Yeah.
you broke some news.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
It's
Winter Springs in the loop. Now we're all in the loop as to some big changes coming to our city on a number of fronts. And I say that in jest, but there's some seriousness to it. You guys are making a lot of good changes. I think there's what I feel is some frustration that maybe things can't change fast enough.
Yeah, it's frustrating for all of us.
It is. But I think the changes may be slow in coming, but they are substantive.
They are.
And,
we have a really passionate group of people on the dais and who really want to see all of those changes. And I think if we can all come together and
is
recognize...
passionate the word for confrontational and divide, like the arguments that are there?
I try to say
I like the word passionate.
Yeah, they are very passionate.
Look, people, all of them are sincere, is my feeling.
I do, I agree.
And if there's disagreements, there's at least sincerity about the disagreement.
I think one of the things that we'll come together on is we all have the same end goal, and it's transparency and progress, and fixing the problems that we had before, making sure our budget is in line. We all have the same goals. It's just how we get there might differ a little bit, and eventually we'll work out our kinks, and I think we'll work great together.
Wow. Well, thank you for being part of this conversation. The premise of the show, it's all live and uncut, and no retakes. We did this all in one take. And I really appreciate your commitment to transparency and dialogue. And so this is on Spotify and YouTube and Apple and all the major platforms. And it's going to be cut up and sliced up in some nice segments for all of our social media platforms. So if you guys go to Winter Springs in the Loop on wherever you watch your podcast, we have both a video and audio version of them. So if you like it, go like and subscribe to it. And, thank Brian. If you have any media needs, promote your business, your brand voice right here in the heart of Tuscaloosa near the old Dominic's Shopping Center, right across from the Music Box and a number of the other good businesses here. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, comment, share it. And we're going to have some really, really cool guests over the next few episodes, both here in the city as well as some county folks. We're going to have these long form, sometimes boring, but always deep and insightful and unscripted conversations. So again, on behalf of Brian and the team here, thanks for watching Winter Springs in the Loop.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. I liked it.
I'm assuming we're offline.
We're done.
There's still a light on.